Okay. Welcome, everybody. Today we have a really interesting seminar. It is titled Looking Within, How Your Inner Life Shapes Your Outer World. And our panelists today are Shrimati Radhe Pavi and Vladimir Yatsenko. Before we get started, I will give a quick introduction of them. Um, they have been our visiting faculty since this past quarter, where they taught the first course on integral yoga. Radhe Pavi is the executive director of the Lagres Sri Aurobindo Integral Life Center. Guided by a deep inner calling toward holistic health and spiritual growth, Radheji embarked on a transformative journey that led her from corporate world to the study of Ayurveda and Jyotisha. In 2007, she completed a 2-year program at the Ayurvedic Institute in New Mexico, including a 6-week uh, Gurukula training in Pune. Let me spotlight her. Spotlight Vladimir ji also. Yeah, so she went through a 6-week Gurukula training in Pune after her Ayurvedic Institute 2-year program in New Mexico, and she studied under Dr. Vasant Lad as well. This immersion awakened in Radheji a devotion to the teachings of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, inspiring her to integrate spiritual wisdom into daily living. In 2017, she joined Lagres Sri Aurobindo Integral Life Center as executive director, where she leads programs, retreats, and integral yoga workshops that reflect her deep spiritual practice. She also founded Medical Relief for India, a non-profit organization that provides free medical camps for underserved rural communities in India. Radheji's professional foundation is equally strong and purposeful. She earned her BS in finance from the University of Southern California and an MBA in finance and strategic planning from Harvard Business School. Over 25 years in the financial services industry, she honed her skills in management, leadership, and strategic development. This extensive experience now informs her work in holistic education and organizational leadership, blending her professional discipline with her spiritual vision to support transformative growth in individuals and communities. Welcome, Radheji. And welcome Vladimir ji as well. Vladimir Yatsenko holds MA in General and Theoretical Linguistics and Sanskrit Language and Literature from St. Petersburg State University and PhD in Indian Philosophy from MS University of Baroda. His doctorate thesis was the Vedic vision and the concept of Agni in the Rig Veda in the light of Sri Aurobindo. Vladimir ji is a scholar and instructor of Sanskrit language and literature and an educator in Vedic and Vedantic studies. He has been teaching in various educational institutions across the world and is aligned with the Indian Psychology Institute in Pondicherry in Bharat, International Center in Integral Studies, New Delhi, Bharat, Sri Aurobindo Center for Advanced Research, also in Pondicherry, SAIIER in Auroville, Oro University in Surat, Arogya Center in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Ayurvedic Institute in Asheville, North Carolina, and a few others. At present, he is a director of the Institute for Applied Research and Integral Studies at Lagres Sri Aurobindo Integral Life Center, South Carolina, organizing and conducting educational research and programs in Indian philosophy, integral yoga, psychology, theoretical linguistics, philosophy of language, studies of Rigveda, Upanishads, and Gita in the light of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. Definitely very well qualified and a very special panelists that we have today in our webinar. Once again, I welcome Radheji and Vladimir ji. So before we get started with our webinar, I would like to ask them if there is anything more they would like to add in way of introduction of themselves and their work and the Lagres Center that they are both closely involved with.
I guess I will just briefly add here that what we're doing here at the center is building a new full facility retreat center. And in the meantime, what we have been doing the last years is hosting every summer an integral yoga retreat in Greenville. So I just wanted to put that out there. It's a 4-day on-site. If anybody finds that they're interested in what we have to say today about Sri Aurobindo and the Mother and would like to have an immersion experience for 4 days, We hope you can join us. Thank you.
Awesome. Vladimir ji, would you like to add anything?
Not really. No, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for your introduction.
And where exactly is this center located, Radhi ji?
We're right outside of Greenville, South Carolina. So it's in Fountain Inn.
Okay. Must be beautiful there.
It is very beautiful. It's country, nature.
Yeah.
Got about
Awesome.
300 acres here, so it's very nice.
Amazing. So shall I show the video now, or would you like to introduce the topic on your own?
What do you think, Vladimir?
Yeah, we can talk. We don't need video for this purpose, no?
Okay.
No?
Sure, yeah. So let me start briefly. So both Radheji and Vladimir ji, they started teaching at Hindu University of America in this past quarter. So they taught the first, in fact, it is ongoing right now, the first course, Integral Yoga, the Path to Conscious Evolution. So in this course, they introduced the concept of integral yoga and the overall vision of Sri Aurobindo for the evolution of humanity. So that is the first course, Integral Yoga, the Path to Conscious Evolution. It is part of a four-course series that they will be teaching at HUA. And the next course that they are going to be teaching, it is called the Evolutionary Soul, Transforming Outer Nature from Within. So in this course, they'll go a little bit deeper into this evolution of the personal, the individual soul, the journey from our current state of human evolution to a higher state that Sri Aurobindo envisioned and talked about. So this webinar today, it will be focused a lot on this upcoming course, but also it will also touch on other topics related to the teachings of Sri Aurobindo in this subject of integral yoga. So with that brief introduction, I'll hand it over to Radhe ji and Vladimir ji. So they will take us through the topic and the talk discussion today. Meanwhile, I would like to request our participants, if you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A box. There is a button in your Zoom controls that says Q&A. Please post them there. If you post them in chat, I might miss them. I might not notice it. I might not come to the question. So please do post only in the Q&A box. I will leave the chat open so that everybody can see everybody's questions and comments. But if it gets a little bit too much, if it becomes distracting, then maybe I might limit the chat messages only for the hosts and the panelists. There is a question I see in the chat. Can we see our fellow participants? Unfortunately not. The webinar format in Zoom, it does not allow us to see everyone. We are doing this in a webinar format, so you can only see the hosts and the panelists. So we'll get started. Radheji and Vladimir ji.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'll go ahead and start, and then Vladimir will conclude this discussion today. And we thank you so very much for that gracious introduction, Aurobindo Swamiji. And of course, we in the LaGrasse Center here are always deeply grateful for the opportunity at our University of America to be able to offer teachings and writings of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. And today, the opportunity we have is to really explore with you a theme that is both ancient in its wisdom, but also we feel directly applicable to today's times. And that perspective that we'd like to share is the transformative power of turning inward. Then this turning inward is founded on the integral yoga of Sri Aurobindo and his spiritual collaborator, the Mother. So I'd like to start with just a brief story. It's a Puranic story about Nadid. Many of you may be familiar with Nadid, the celestial singer, and he's the intermediary between the gods and the humans. And as the story goes, Nadid was approached by two sadhaks, both who are yearning for this experience of the divine. And the first sadhak goes to Nadid and says, Nadid, how long will it be till I realize the divine? I've been diligently performing my spiritual practices day in and day out, but no results. And he pleads for Nadid, please, when will I meet the divine? And so Nadid looks at him, says, well, it's at least another 50 births, 50 reincarnations. What? Says the sadhak. You mean I have to wait until 50 more births? My God, Nadid, you're bad news. And Nadid can only say, well, you asked me, I've just given you the answer. And then the second sadhak, same question. Nadid, when will I be able to meet the divine? And Nadid says, about 500 births. But interestingly, instead of despair, the second sadhak was filled with this immense gratitude. And he said, wow, only 500 births until I meet the divine? Thank you so much, Nadid. And in that very moment of that sincere aspiration and gratitude, the sadhak achieved a realization of the divine. And why? Because he came from that inner poise of the soul that was deeply aspiring to meet the divine. Whereas we saw that first sadhak was really coming from the poise of the outer ego, right? Oh, the divine is going to make me wait 50 births. I've been working so hard on my sadhana, and this is the reward I get. Instead, that second sadhak came from an inner soul voice and made the divine a present reality right then and there. And this inward turn or inner orientation to life is really the crux of internal yoga and to the transformation of our outer nature, our mind, our emotions, our body. In this process of transformation, which Aurobindo and the mother refers to as the divinization of nature, is the ultimate aim of their integral yoga, which begins by looking within. The Sri Aurobindo reminds us that we are not merely human beings striving to live a divine life, whether we are divine beings living a human existence. And that this transformation of our human existence into a divine life is possible. Only again, it requires a shift inward, living a life from this inner poise of the soul. Some of you may be familiar with Ayurveda. In Ayurveda, the word for being centered in the self is Swastia, which literally means to be established in the self, right? Or established in the soul. And when we lose that connection with ourself, Ayurveda says we become aswastia, right? We become uncentered, disconnected, scalted, and that puts us in a state of dis-ease. And if we think about it, most of the time we actually live from a surface existence, a state of dis-ease, of which is all organized around the ego. And certainly, nature developed the ego for a reason. It's necessary and instrumental for the development of our individuality, but unfortunately, we tend to mistake this temporary scaffold, this ego, for our true self. And we start to become over-identified with an outer personality, which is shaped by genetics, social conditioning, mental preferences, desires. But if we stop for a moment and we venture just behind this surface, we find a much deeper reality, the real truth of our being, the soul. Sri Aurobindo tells us that this shift from living outwardly to within is not only a very real possibility for each of us, but it's a part of an evolution that will happen globally, a transition which he calls the subjective age, moving away from an era governed by external regulations and rules and objective logic into an age defined by self-knowledge, knowledge of the self. Sri Aurobindo says, there will be a shift from the individualistic age, and this is the age that we've been in which reason and knowing and understanding outwardly through objective means, to an age of knowing and understanding through subjective means, self-knowledge, becoming self-conscious, and coming face to face with the soul in oneself, acting out of this deeper self rather than floundering on surfaces. And so again, this brings us back to Ayurvedic's ancient notion of well-being, swastia, right? To be situated in the self is what the subjective age is about. And when we come, as Sri Aurobindo says, kind of face to face with the soul in oneself, and we act from that depth, then rather than this floundering on the surfaces that he describes, it actually starts to transform our outer nature. Our mind, our emotions, our body actually begins to be able to express their true dharma, their true purpose, right? So our mind will become a vehicle for wisdom and intuition, and we'll be able to assess levels of discernment that our reasonable, rational, objective logic doesn't have access to right now. And our heart will transform to this pure vessel of joy and love and harmony, right? Rather than desires or passions or our likes and dislikes. And our body will develop into a more perfect instrument. Mother says it'll be a body of strength, flexibility, adaptability, rather than this instrument currently driven mostly by habits and instincts and sensations. And during this transition into the subjective age, there will be a widespread entry into the inner subliminal realms, while deeper knowledge and the discovery of new powers are uncovered. This, Sri Aurobindo says, will be the first essential sign of the subjective age, the discovery of new powers, new possibilities, new means of expression. And to some extent, such powers or cities have already been uncovered throughout history, but mainly as something exceptional or viewed as a miracle or even unpredictable. Sri Aurobindo describes these miraculous powers or cities of the past as the casual or incomplete manifestation of an acquired capacity, rather than the organization of a new consciousness, a new life, and a new nature. So this organization of a new consciousness is the emergence of soul consciousness and its qualities such as humility, gratitude, courage, equanimity, goodwill. Here at the LaGras Center, these soul qualities are really the foundation of who we are. And we refer to these soul qualities as living principles. And these living principles we'll explore in some depth in our upcoming course. And so as these soul qualities percolate outward, they are expressed through our actions in the world, our professions, our relationships, our activities, our societal roles will then all come from a place of humility and gratitude and courage and goodwill. These soul qualities are actually spiritual powers, which when we align our outer actions with our soul's swabhava is the unique path of development that our soul has chosen for its growth in this life. This is what Sri Aurobindo calls swabhava, this unique path of development that our soul has chosen for its growth in this life. And so our outer actions, when imbued with these soul qualities, help us align with our unique swabhava. And if you look at the world today, we see so much discontent, we see a lot of distress, we see a lot of people that are really kind of lacking a sense of strong purpose. And most of the time, this is likely because their outer life is not aligned with their soul's swabhava or soul purpose. So the unique swabhava of the soul, which Sri Aurobindo identifies as 4 main lines of development in any one life, is going to be another big topic that we're going to be covering in the upcoming course. So the alignment of our outer nature with our soul nature will radically transform how we interact with one another. Currently, most of our human interactions and relationships, they're built on attachments, expectations, hereditary ties, superficial notions of love, etc. But things are going to shift. And in the subjective age, we will move beyond these ordinary boundaries of family and romance, and instead, we'll connect with each other at the soul level. Soul-centered relationships will become more prevalent in our lives. Relationships that are built on soul identity, spiritual closeness. shared journey of the inner discovery. While the current model of relationships that are built on utility and security and biological impulse, it's still the standard operating system for most of the world, but we're starting to see the emergence of soul-centered relationships. And individuals increasingly are relocating to intentional communities where the primary bond is the shared commitment to inner growth. And there's a growing trend of people choosing platonic life partners. These are deep, lifelong commitments between friends that transcend the romance or the family bond. And so this is a direct example of soul-centered relationships in which two people recognize a deep soul affinity and choose to build a life and a home together based on shared spiritual visions. And the movement from soul-centered relationships to true brotherhood will then, Sri Aurobindo say, be the next great step in humanity's journey towards world unity. At the soul level, we connect deeply and individually, but at the brotherhood, it's about extending that individual soul connection into a collective sense of oneness. And so in moving towards soul-centered relationships, we're preparing ourselves for a collective consciousness where brotherhood becomes a living reality, where we not only find spiritual fulfillment, but contribute to the collective evolution of humanity. And so to explore this very profound implications of soul-centered relationships at all levels in the world, I'd like to now turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Vladimir Yatsenko. Vladimir?
Thank you, Radhi.
Thank you so much, Radheji. Before Vladimir ji starts, there was a question that is related to what you just spoke about. I wonder if we could quickly answer it. Somebody asked about the difference between Ikshwaku actually. He asked about the difference between the self, ego essential requirements. I don't know what ego essential requirements means, but difference between the self, ego, and ego essential requirements.
Oh, it's in the queue. Please explain difference between self. So the self is our innermost being, our soul, if you will, or in the integral yoga, we call it the psychic being because it actually has an evolutionary role. And the ego is our outer ego-centered, in which our mind and our emotions and our body is currently kind of centered around. And the idea is to shift that anchor from what is now the ego to the inner self, to the self, or to the soul. This is what's coming during the subjective age, that will turn inwards to our own truth, our inward truth, rather than looking externally and being anchored within the ego. I don't know if hopefully that'll help define that.
Yes, I think it did.
Okay.
Thank you so much. And this is probably covered in Vladimir ji's presentation. If not, I would request him to talk a little bit about it. I wanted to ask you about integral yoga. Most of us have heard this word, especially in the context of Aurobindo's teachings. But I think many of us are more familiar with regular yoga, asana practice, and even bhakti yoga and karma yoga. But what exactly is integral yoga? How it differs from other yoga practices? What is it that makes it? Why is it called integral yoga? If you can cover it as part of your presentation, that would be nice. I'll turn it over to Vladimir ji.
Oh, yeah, of course. Right. Yes, thank you, Radha, for this very, very vast kind of layout for us. And very beautifully, all the elements of this course are touched and highlighted. And regarding integral yoga, actually, it is integral as it is following the Gita also to a certain extent. Purna yoga. Purna is integral, actually. Full yoga, complete yoga, yes. In Sri Aurobindo's case, of course, he uses the same karma yoga, bhakti yoga, and jnana yoga as the constituents of his integral yoga, but adds also the yoga of self-perfection. So kind of integrating all these movements of consciousness into one living, yes, making it applicable to life. And in that sense, there is no separation of spirit and matter in that case. We are looking for the material divine life, yes? The divine life in material framework. So we are not not trying to get out of this material life into some spiritual heights and depths, but we try to bring that presence of the divine into our everyday life. So that's
Vladimir ji, sorry to interrupt. There is a request for you to either speak up or increase the volume of your
all
microphone.
right.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, sorry for that. Is it better now? It should be. I see my level is quite high.
Yes, definitely better. Yeah, better than before.
Okay,
Thank you.
I can check here also. Oh yes, it can go higher. It can go much higher. It should be much better now.
Yes, it's even better. Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. So today I wanted to touch upon these elements of our course which usually are not very well known. Sri Aurobindo is not only the prophet of individualism and individual development and all the elements he describes in his integral yoga as the soul coming to the front and taking charge of our outer nature, of our mental, vital, and physical nature, but he also was the prophet of the ideal of human unity. And this is something interesting. It's kind of rare to find any sage or prophet or rishi who speaks in that language. It's closer to the rishis of the Vedic time, the last message of the Rig Veda, Sambanana Treya, addresses humanity, go together, speak together, put your minds together, yes? That is your well-being together. That kind of language and that kind of thinking is quite rare. Usually we try to speak about yoga as some kind of special individual achievement and realization, but not in terms of the social change. So I would like to address this. He has two major works. He has two major works, The Human Cycle and The Ideal of Human Unity, which address this issue in depth and which explains also our subjective age and the movement towards the spiritual age. So let me project this slides which I prepared for today because it is his quotations and it is much better to read and to see his language, how he languages these ages of development. There is the whole human cycle of development. So I will start with this small quotation from The Ideal of Human Unity, which is kind of telling us of the importance of this knowledge. Nothing is more obscure to humanity or less seized by its understanding, whether in the power that moves it or the sense of the aim towards which it moves, than its own communal and collective life. And it is totally true. We know nothing about our communal or collective life. Hardly anything. We just only guess here and there. So in the Vedic tradition or Indian tradition, if you look at the archetypes which were developed, by which we constantly operate even today, we can see that there is 4 different seasons, 4 different ashrams, 4 different yugas, yes? And Sri Aurobindo follows the same pattern, 4 different ages, so 5 in this case, because there will be spiritual age of a subjective age as a transition to another symbolic age, and 4 different varnas and 4 different mahashaktis, and you can see how they all correspond to the same dynamics of our development, and not only individual, but also social. It seems that we are like a big social organism, yeah, like one entity, communal person, as it were, which has the group soul, And the idea which Indian tradition introduces, that this group soul is also coming down and kind of reincarnates. And these reincarnations of group souls are called manvantaras, greater periods. Within these manvantaras, there is the whole cycle of development, starting with Mahasatya Yuga and ending with Mahakali Yuga. And within these Mahayugas, there are smaller yugas, so to say. So it's like holographic pictures. Within each period, there is four periods. It's like, it's an amazing vision of development of developmental paradigm for the social or individual beings. So as we are born, we're like child, is born, and that is the beginning, brahmacharya or spring, where everything is beautiful for us, like Satya Yuga, everything is possible. Yes, mother and father takes care of you. You can play with games with the world and feel the pleasure of interaction totally free. Then there is coming summer, you grow, you become adolescent, and that is, you start to learn certain things. There are some hormones starting to kick in. You have to know what is good, what is wrong, what is right, what is true, what is untrue. So you start learning and build up your understanding of your dharmas. And then you come to the stage where you have to be very careful what you say, how you speak, how you move, how you behave, conventional age finally. And finally you become old and Kali Yuga comes, winter, the body is very worn out, but the wisdom is already there. So it's individualistic age. And so you can see how beautifully it is, always coming from the vaster spiritual point of view towards more and more narrowing down to the nitty-gritties of our material life. And so by these cycles, we develop, we come with freedom and claim over the embodied life, and then slowly we become less and less sure and more wise and restricted in our dealings with reality. Why it is important? Because this is the norm by which we live, or archetype, which is found in everything. And Sri Aurobindo follows this archetype also for his own description, for his psychology of social development. That was the name he gave to the human cycle, the psychology of social development. Interesting name, yes? Tells a lot. If we compare with other systems, like look at this, Sri Aurobindo has put this symbolic age, typal, conventional individualistic age, and subjective age as a transition towards new spiritual age, new symbolic age. Then we see that it has certain correspondence, and he speaks about this openly in the human cycle. Satya, Treta, Dvapara, and Kali Yuga, and then Pralaya between the Manvantaras. Yeah? There is another language was developed by Jean Gebser in his ever-present origin, which is also somewhat fitting into the same structure. And when he discovered that Sri Aurobindo had his own views, he thought that Sri Aurobindo, from his subtle plane, influenced his views of Jean Gebser. So we start with archaic. I didn't put archaic here. And then magic structure, mythical, mental, and finally integral structure of consciousness, where all the structures are presented in more efficient manner. So I'm just showing you the archetypal structure, which I will follow now in my presentation. So, symbolic and typal stages of human society. These are quotations straight from Sri Aurobindo's human cycle. The first, the symbolic stage, is this evolution, is predominantly religious and spiritual, like the childhood. And the other elements, psychological, ethical, economic, physical, are there, but subordinated to the spiritual and religious idea. The second stage after this grand symbolic age of Samhitas of the Vedas, comes the stage of typal creation, Brahmanas, where all the texts were assigned to particular rituals and, cultural context. The second stage, which we may call the typal, is predominantly psychological and ethical. All else, even the spiritual and religious, is subordinate to the psychological idea and to the ethical ideal which expresses it. Religion becomes then a mystic sanction for the ethical motive and discipline, dharma. The dharmas are being coined in this typal age, by which we operate even now. That becomes its chief social utility. And for the rest, it takes a more and more otherworldly turn. So we know about the spiritual, but it becomes like otherworldly more and more. The idea of the direct expression of the divine being or cosmic principle in man ceases to dominate or to be the leader and in the forefront. It recedes, stands in the background, and finally disappears from the practice, and in the end even from the theory of life. This typal stage creates a great social ideals, which remain impressed upon the human mind even when the stage itself is past. All our dharmic and ethical ideals are coming from this stage of development. The conventional age which follows, or Treta Yuga, the Satya Yuga, Treta, Dvapara Yuga. So, for the typal passes naturally into the conventional age. The conventional stage of human society is born when the external supports the outward expressions of the spirit or the ideal become more important, than the ideal. The outward expressions of the spirit or the ideal become more important than the ideal itself. The body or even the clothes more important than the person. So the appearance becomes more important than the real person behind. The tendency of the conventional age of society is to fix, to arrange firmly, to formalize, to erect a system of rigid grades and hierarchies, to stereotype religion, to bind education and training to a traditional and unchangeable form, to subject thought to infallible authorities, to cast a stamp of finality on what seems to it the finished life of man. So here we have this big shift which is coming closer to Kali Yuga, and that's why Krishna generated Kurukshetra, because he wanted to move away from this conventional age. By the way, all the new religions which are coming in this time, Buddhism, Gita, Jainism, and all other, they are nothing but an attempt to change this conventionalism into something more vivid and living. And that's what Aurobindo is telling us about individualistic age. And individualistic age of human society comes as a result of the corruption and failure of the conventional, as a revolt against the reign of the petrified typal figure. Before it can be born, it is necessary that the old truths shall have been lost in the soul and practice of the race, and that even the conventions which ape and replace them shall have become devoid of real sense and intelligence. They have to become only rituals, empty rituals. Stripped of all practical justification, they exist only mechanically by fixed idea, by the force of custom, by attachment to the form. Don't we know that? the dogma, the dogmatism in our thinking, in our traditions, and so on. The individualism of the age, of the new age, is an attempt to get back from conventionalism of belief and practice to some solid bedrock, no matter what, of real and tangible truth. Enough of these stories. I want to experience the truth. And it is necessarily individualistic, because all the old general standards have become bankrupt and can no longer give any inner help. It is therefore the individual who has to become a discoverer, a pioneer. Notice how he speaks about individual. Aurobindo was always the prophet of individualism, because he believes only through individual one can realize the truth. And it is so, not through the social arrangement. And to search out by the individual reason, intuition, idealism, desire, claim upon life, or whatever other light he finds in himself, the true law of the world and of its own being. So we have now transition. We are transitioning from this individualistic, egoistic age, or in terms of Gebser, mental structure of consciousness with heavy criticism of all other structures, to the subjective age. This transition is quite already obvious. Yeah? We can see how it happens in the world. So the inherent aim and effort and justification, the psychological seed cause, the whole tendency of development of individualistic age of mankind, all go back to one dominant need of rediscovering the substantial truths of life. Thought and action, not only life, thought and action, which have been overlaid by the falsehood of conventional standards, no longer alive to the truth of the ideas from which their conventions started. It is this principle and necessity that justify an age of individualism and rationalism and make it, however short it may be, an inevitable period in the cycle. A temporary reign of the critical reason, largely destructive in its action, is an imperative need for human progress. Notice he speaks about destructive in its character and action. And it is totally true. Look at our individualistic age, our critical mind. We destroyed nearly the whole ecology on Earth, yes? And it is still needed, yeah? And because it does something to us, it prepares us for the search for the real, deeper truth within us. So the primal law and purpose of the individual life is to seek its own self-development. Consciously or half-consciously, or with an obscure unconscious groping, it strives always and rightly strives at self-formulation, to find itself, to discover within itself the law and power of its own being, and to fulfill it. The individual is not merely the ephemeral physical creature, a form of mind and body that aggregates and dissolves, but a being, a living power of the eternal truth, the self-manifesting spirit. So if we look at the individual from this point of view, the shift towards subjective age becomes quite clear. Finally, if our analysis and forecast are correct, the human evolution must move through a subjective towards a supra-rational or spiritual age. in which we will develop progressively a greater spiritual, supra-intellectual, and intuitive, perhaps in the end a more than intuitive and Gnostic consciousness. The man will be able to perceive a higher divine hand, a divine sanction, a divine light of guidance for all he seeks to be, think, feel, and do, and able to more and more to obey and live in the larger light and power. So these are just few quotations from the human cycle to explain this, the whole progression towards the spiritual age from the symbolic age, where everything was open to us, like to the children. And now, through this narrowing down, we come at the necessity of widening or deepening again. A change of this kind, the change from the mental and vital to the spiritual order of life, must necessarily be accomplished in the individual, and in a great number of individuals, because it can lay any effective hold upon the community. The spirit in humanity discovers, develops, builds its formations first in the individual man. It is through the progressive and formative individual that it offers the discovery and the chance of a new self-creation to the mind of the race. Again, you see individual groups of individuals. Aurobindo speaks about that he would need 100 individuals to change the world in some of his letters. And then Mother even says if there would be only 12 individuals who would sincerely dedicate their life to the search of the divine together, they would make a big progress. For it is into the divine within them that man and mankind have to grow. It is not an external idea or rule that has to be imposed on them from without. Therefore, the law of growing in a freedom is that which will be most honored in the spiritual age of mankind. A growing in a freedom of every individual, going beyond all conventions. Aurobindo speaks also of the divine anarchy as the ideal, the divine anarchy. That means everyone finds the truth in himself, and by finding truth in himself, he finds his proper position to the society. By the way, the attempt was made to build Auroville on those principles. Its aim will be to diminish as soon and as far as possible the need of the element of external compulsion in human life by awakening the inner divine compulsion of the spirit within, and all the preliminary means it will use will have that for its aim. By the way, when first the Aurovillians came to the mother and asked her, give us some regulations for how could we accept people for Auroville, and the mother said, because we do not know how to accept people, who is who, we need regulations, some mental rules. Mother says, as long as there are no rules and regulation, there is still a hope for Auroville. This is exactly that ideal. Yes, the ideal of the spiritual age. Because we all recognize the truth within ourselves. We don't need regulations if we relate to that inner truth. So with this, I want to stop with the human cycle and want to come to some elements of the ideal of human unity, where it is viewed from the perspective of the future development. This is something fundamental. I changed, you see, the pattern is becoming more like the sun-like. The ideal of human unity. I will go forward because of the lack of time. So first I want to say the ideal of human unity was written in the time of the same time in the period of Arya, from 1914 till 1920. And as we see it, this is something which becomes more and more prominent in humanity. 10 years back, it was hardly even mentioned. By the way, 10 years back, I was trying to Google a human unity as a concept, and I had only few references. That means there was no such ideal as of human unity altogether. Nobody believed that human unity is possible. Look at our life together on earth. Every nation, every country is fighting for its own, profits and positions and relations. It is hardly even thinkable that we are one humanity. And Sri Aurobindo writes this book at the beginning of 20th century, after this First World War, before the Second World War. So it's a pressing demand of our time, especially at the beginning of the subjective age. We are entering into the subjective age. You could feel it. Notice that everybody's truth, whatever he says, he believes in it, and we are reading all this information, all subjective, mixed, what Aurobindo calls false subjectivism, because we didn't learn how to be truly subjective yet. So we undergo this stage of false subjectivism just now in humanity. When the polarization of human societies on dictatorships and democracies becomes so sharp, so uncompromising, and it endangers the very existence of human civilization, we can see these wars everywhere. For all problems of existence are essentially problems of harmony, says Sri Aurobindo. It is only by resolving the discords of individual freedom of nations, and social order, that we can find the solution. And Sri Aurobindo puts these two, the community and individual, into the opposites. Individual needs its freedom of development, and the society wants to restrict it and to make it more and more manageable, yes, for the society. So society has its own, and socialism its own, and capitalism its own. And there is these two parties, Democratic Party and the Republican. Notice they're fitting into this profile quite well. One is pushing for the individual, freedom of enterprise, and others are trying to arrange everything, give equal opportunities to everyone. So between these two, there is a constant ongoing interaction and disagreement. So Sri Aurobindo addresses this in the ideal of human unity in this way: liberty, equality, and fraternity, known terms for us. So, for liberty is insufficient, he says. Justice also is necessary. The cry for equality arises. But liberty and equality can never be quite satisfactorily reconciled so long as man, individual, lives by egoism, so long as he cannot undergo a great spiritual and psychological change and rise beyond mere communal association to that third ideal, which some vague inner sense made the revolutionary thinkers of France add to their watchwords of liberty and equality, the greatest of all the three, the ideal of fraternity, or an inner oneness. That no mechanism, social, political, religious, has ever created or can create. It must take birth in the soul and rise from a hidden and divine depth within. And this is the whole issue and problem of our future development. Unless we address that fraternity or that brotherhood within, that soul development, psychological and spiritual change, the real change outside will not come. This is the dilemma in which we are. freedom, equality, brotherhood are three godheads of the soul. Notice it is his language. Are the three godheads of the soul. Freedom, equality, brotherhood. They cannot be really achieved through the external machinery of society or by man, so long as he lives only in the individual and the communal ego. When the ego claims liberty, now he gives the description of what happens then. When ego claims liberty, as we see it today, it arrives at competitive individualism. When it asserts equality, it arrives first at strife, then at an attempt to ignore the variations of nature, doesn't like variations, wants to equalize everything, make uniformal, and as the sole way of doing that successfully, it constructs an artificial and machine-made society, a society that pursues liberty as its ideal, is unable to achieve equality. A society that aims at equality will be obliged to sacrifice liberty. And don't we see this? Socialism and communism on one side, what did they do? They removed all individual liberties, yes, and created laws for everything, laws upon laws upon laws. So everywhere you are restricted to a particular way of being. You have no freedom to discover, to make mistakes. And on the other side, free, wild capitalism allowed any cowboy with his own, to find his way out through whatever means and difficulties and egoisms, and grow in power of individual assertion. So between these two and I'm wondering why there are two parties in the US, Democrats and Republicans. And when I see this, what Aurobindo writes, it's totally true. So they will never reconcile unless there will be third party of everyone recognizing in their heart that we are all brothers and sisters of America and the world. And we have to treat each other totally differently. It doesn't matter what you need. Maybe you need more equality now, or social support, or maybe individual freedom. Both are to be there, and none can be without the other. For the ego to speak of fraternity, Aurobindo says, is for it to speak of something contrary to its nature. It cannot speak of fraternity. All that it knows is association for the pursuit of common egoistic ends, ego. So it has the egoistic force of association with particular social order or with certain egoistic needs and desires, individualistic. So the union of liberty and equality. The union of liberty and equality can only be achieved by the power of human brotherhood, and it cannot be founded on anything else. This is prophetic for us. We cannot find the solution for these two, only in the brotherhood, change of consciousness. But brotherhood exists only in the soul and by the soul. It can exist by nothing else. For this brotherhood is not a matter either of physical kinship or of vital association or of intellectual agreement. When the soul claims freedom, it is the freedom of its self-development, the self-development of the divine in man, in all his being. When it claims, now notice we spoke before ego, how ego claims, and now how the soul claims liberty, equality, and fraternity. Let's read it again. For this brotherhood is not a matter either of physical kinship or vital association or intellectual agreement. When the soul claims freedom, it is the freedom of its self-development and the self-development of the divine in man, in all his being. That is the freedom. When it claims equality, what it is claiming is that freedom equally for all and the recognition of the same soul, the same Godhead in all human beings. When it strives for brotherhood, it is founding the equal freedom and self-development on the common aim. A common life, a unity of mind and feeling founded upon the recognition of this inner spiritual unity. These three things are in fact the nature of the soul itself. For freedom, equality, unity are the eternal attributes of the spirit. What a wonderful vision. So we are partially following that spiritual attributes when we want liberty or equality, but because they are partial, they cannot be fulfilled. There are a few more slides, but maybe I will stop here because it's already quite enough for us to discuss, and we have half an hour more. Do we have 1.5 hours or 1 hour only?
Usually we try to keep it around 1 hour, but we do
Oh, yeah, then
usually
I'm
go
over time.
over a little bit. That is okay. We can go over a little bit. If you want to wrap up your presentation, or are you pretty much done, Vladimir ji?
It's fine. I would rather engage than people.
Yeah. That was really great presentation. It was kind of, I mean, I would say it was a little bit mind blowing for me to see that third thing, liberty, equality, and then how the fraternity is what really makes the difference. That was one mind blowing insight for me. And the other mind blowing insight for me was the difference between the liberty, equality, and fraternity of the ego versus liberty, equality, and fraternity of the soul. That is another thing that makes a really big difference. So that's really great. Thank you so much for this presentation. It gave me some insights that I had not thought of before. It all makes sense when you hear somebody like you present it, and it seems like such a normal or common sense kind of thing that should be there, but it's not easily accessible to us unless a master like Aurobindo presents it to us, and it comes to us through you. And that's one of the things I do want to share with our audience here, that there is a popular conception that Sri Aurobindo's writings are very high level and very dense, and it's not easy to read and understand them. But as you can see today, Radheji and Vladimirji, they make it so much accessible for us. And that is the main reason why we have them as visiting faculty here at HUA and introduce these courses, so that they can make this profound wisdom accessible through us in a language and medium that is much more easier in these times. With that, we'll move to a couple of questions. In the meantime, I also want to mention I have posted a link to their upcoming course in our chat. It is going to be starting in April, on April 11th. I want to ask one question, quick question, short answer for this. So this is the second course in the 4 course series that you are both teaching. So there is no requirement for people to have done the first course in order to join the second course, right? Anyone can join the second course and they will be equally at home and they'll be able to learn. Would you please clarify that?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's always nice to enter the integral vision from whatever end.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I would just add to that we will do that very first session. We will do kind of a metaphysical overview, which was mainly the focus on the first quarter. This will be psychological, but we'll do a bit of a review so that that people that weren't in that last class will kind of start on the same level.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And there is also a question about the um, age limit for the students. I want to mention that from HUA side, we don't have a limit. Even young people can join. But from the point of view of the faculty, so the specific question the Ruchiji is asking is, she has teenager kids, 15 and 17 years old, and they have been taking Vedanta classes since the age of 7. Would it be okay for them to join this course?
Yeah, we could welcome them very much so, and we could orient ourselves and become more sincere in our presentations because they will be there. So we have to really be totally not just metaphysically, equipped, but also open to learn more how to view. They are the future of humanity, so they have to learn that vision of Sri Aurobindo for the future of humanity in a way. So
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
believe so. At least I do not know what are other things.
Okay, thank you so much. So there you go, Ruchiji. You can join along with your kids, your teenagers. One of the things that keeps coming up in the modern times when people talk about artificial intelligence and robotics, right? One of my friends, we were discussing what career their kids could choose in the future that would not be taken over by artificial intelligence and robotics. We couldn't think of anything. So that led to a larger question: what will humanity do when everything, all the work is being done by robots and artificial intelligence? And there is this popular saying in the West that the idle mind becomes the workshop of the devil. So there is concern about what will be the state of humanity in the future. So for that reason also, I think it's really important for younger people to be exposed to this knowledge, so that in the future, when the world has changed due to all these technological impacts and human life has also changed, they will know how to better utilize time and energy and anything else that frees up, and make sure that there is less strife and more peace and fraternity. Anything else you want to add to that, Radheji or Vladimirji, or shall we move on to the next question?
Yeah, one can say something or other. What do you like to say on artificial intelligence and
Right
the
ahead, Vladimir.
yeah?
If you'd like to comment, go right ahead.
Well, the artificial intelligence is only a tool as I see it, yes. If you
Yes.
look at it as a very useful tool, which kind of helps you to take a load of the mental labor away from you that we spend so much time, composing and making sentences. So in a way, it's just a very useful tool if you have where to go or what to achieve or what to realize in life. So we have to concentrate more on the inner development. We have more time for this now with the
Yes.
help of artificial intelligence. If it substitutes all our life, of course, it's a danger, but otherwise not.
Thank you. And this is an interesting question that came up earlier from Hima ji. How would we know that we are totally free of ego? We might think that is the case, but it might not actually be true. And even that thought that we are free of ego might be driven by ego.
It is, in a way.
That's absolutely true. The minute you think that, you know that you're not. I know Sri Aurobindo has a saying that the ego is the helper, the ego is the bar, right? And so this was the earlier point about the ego is needed, right? It's needed for individuation. So, but what happens at some point in our evolution is that it becomes the bar, that we think we are the ego. We think we are this outer being, this nature, if you will, and it prevents us from really being able to discover our true self, our soul, our psychic being, as we often call it. And so one of the first things you might start to notice if you think that you are stepping back and really starting to separate yourself from sort of this outer noise and commotion that's kind of anchored in the ego is that you'll get this sense of being kind of having a different center of gravity, if you will. It's almost as if they call it chakshi, as if you're stepping back and being able to witness what's going on around you, your thoughts, your actions, your interactions with others. You're stepping back from that kind of ego poise into the more of a poise of the Purusha, right? The observer, if you will. And I think also you'll start, I mean, there's many signs to it. There will probably always be some ego attachment, but you may also start to, instead of going, like we mentioned in the earlier age, using rationale and logic and outer regulations, that there will be more of a discernment, almost a psychic discernment, you can call it, of right and wrong, where it's not even being processed by our linear or rational mind. So you'll start to notice these small actually they're pretty big shifts in you. And there'll be this sense, I think Vladimir brought it up, of equanimity, right? That we're not, again, being tossed and turned in the outer world with all that's going around. And we realize, right, that we're not the doer. This at the end of the day is that we are not the doers, and so there's a number of signs, but I would say one, ego is needed. Egoism isn't. The ego is needed, and at some point it becomes kind of that bar if we start to over-identify, and it prevents us from really looking within to where our true self, our true Purusha is.
Yeah, very, very true. Very nice. Aurobindo also makes a slight distinction between ego and egoism. Yeah? Egoism is something with excessive selfishness or something, fear, built on some kind of distortion of ego sense. But ahankara, ego sense, is a natural kind of position of the nature for nature to function. And in that sense, there is a way for ego to submit to the higher ideal and to be instrumental to that ideal, the same as artificial intelligence. Yes, it can take over or it can be instrumental for your inner development. So in that sense, yes.
Thank you so much. There is a question from Vijayji specifically about the course. While I ask the question, I'll also share my screen to show the course to everybody, how it looks on our website. So he's looked at this course description, and he wants to know about the topics that are covered in the course. So if you can give a little bit more insight into what is covered in the course beyond the description that is shown here. Either Radheji or Vladimirji, if you can tell us a little bit more about what is.
If you wouldn't mind just going down to the course objectives, and that'll give us a better sense of how we've structured this course. There we go. That's perfect. So what we'll start with, as we mentioned, is a bit of an overview of the aim or goal of integral yoga. And integral yoga is seen as a triple transformation. One, the psychic, the soul, the self, which we've been pretty much addressing. Two, a spiritual transformation where we open up to spiritual light of higher mind, higher levels of mind. And then the final, the supramental, which is a whole discussion onto itself. So I won't go into it necessarily right now, but the course will focus on this first one, the psychic transformation. It's really meant to be more psychological, more application of integral yoga. And we'll take a look at the soul and its journey, not only throughout life and its development, swabhava and the soul qualities that I briefly mentioned, but we'll also look at preparation of the soul for coming into embodiment. What happens? How does that occur? And how it prepares to leave this body for the next reincarnation. So when we say journey of the soul, it's kind of a complete cycle, and much focus being on swabhava and soul powers, the particular line of development that the soul chooses in any one lifetime, and the qualities, the essence of that soul consciousness. And so you'll see swabhava, swadharma, how that translates into outer action. And you'll see the 12 transformative soul powers, the quality, the aspiration, sincerity, right? And then Vladimir will do a bit on what we are calling faculties of consciousness or instruments of consciousness, and how through the integral education of Sri Aurobindo and the mother, we can refine and perfect these so that they can be true instruments for high levels of consciousness. So I hope that gives a little bit of a sense as to what it's all about.
It does. Thank you so much. Will there be any practice aspects covered, like
Yes.
any specific practices that will also be taught?
Yeah, we will definitely give practices and meditations that can be used. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I have posted this link in the chat, so you can click on register for the course here, and then you can sign up for the course. So we hope to see you all there. I will post a poll also. Please do respond to this poll. That should have shown up now on your screen. And while the poll is going on, I'll ask the next question that came up. Everybody can see the poll, right? I hope people can see and respond to the poll.
Yeah, I could see it.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know if others could.
Yeah.
But it says I couldn't answer it.
Okay, probably because you are a panelist.
I know.
So, related to the course, are there exams and homework?
So the way that we've typically will structure it is that there is the primary homework is going to be readings and films, videos. And what we'll do is that we take the particular subject, we address it first in a session, and then we give you follow-up readings and, like I said, videos that will go deeper, but you'll have some base to work from as you go into those readings. And then typically what we do is just a writing assignment at the end instead of having quizzes all the way along. And it's more of a reflective, introspective writing as to applications of what you've learned throughout the course in your own life.
Okay, thank you so much. There is a question or maybe a comment. Creating the heaven on planet Earth can have a divinity in human being. Is that the correct interpretation of text as explained? Presume the text that is being referred to here is the presentation that Vladimir ji was showing earlier.
Right. There is something, yes, which I did in the last slide, which was important most probably now. The question comes for the last slide, which I didn't touch upon. Mankind, manifestation of Godhead, it's called. It's interesting.
Go ahead and show it if you want to.
Okay, I can show it and it will be the answer quite well. Look at this. The fundamental idea is that mankind is the Godhead, to be worshipped and served by man, and that the respect, the service, the progress of human being and human life are the chief duty and the chief aim of the human spirit. No other idol, neither the nation, the state, the family, nor anything else ought to take its place, humanity. This is the human unity. They are only worthy of respect so far as they are images of the human spirit and enshrine its presence and aid its self-manifestation. All this comes from Sri Aurobindo's philosophy that the divine wants to embody itself, yes, to manifest itself in this time and space, and the human beings are nothing but that the agents of that embodiment. We are yajamanas, we are the sparks of the divine, which has to grow and to become manifested. Now look how he speaks about treatment of human beings in this light. Man must be sacred to man, regardless of all distinctions of race, creed, color, nationality, status, political or social advancement. The body of man is to be respected, made immune from violence and outrage, fortified by science against disease and preventable death. The life of man is to be held sacred, preserved, strengthened, ennobled, uplifted. The heart of man is to be held sacred also, given scope, protected from violation, from suppression, from mechanization, freed from belittling influences. The mind of man is to be released from all bonds, allowed freedom and range and opportunity, given all its means of self-training and self-development, and organized in the play of its powers for the service of humanity. Now look at this vision. This is definitely the heaven on earth. What else is there?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's amazing that when such knowledge and philosophy has already been expressed so many years back, it's still taking so much time for it to spread across humanity, and we still see so much strife. So that question has been answered. I'll go to the last one. How could it look like to start cultivating liberty, equality, and fraternity within oneself? Fraternity could be between the parts of the being, all going in the same direction, led by the psychic.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It is all led by the psychic, by this divine presence in us, and it will reconcile naturally between because the freedom is individual, and the equality, you value the same individual freedom in others because you know what it means. You see yourself in all and all in yourself, as the Isha Upanishad says, of course.
This question kind of brings us full circle, because the course itself and this webinar talks about how the inner soul and the state of the inner soul reflects what is happening outside. So in one way, we could think that all the strife and other things that we see in our own personal lives as well as in the world outside is because of that strife inside. And Linda ji
Absolutely.
correctly pointed out that as we start developing fraternity inside, it will reflect outside as well. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
So
Arvind
before
ji.
we end the webinar today, are there any concluding thoughts you would like to share, Radhe ji and Vladimir ji?
I think we loaded it pretty much today. There was a tremendous amount covered. I will just say that the Integral Yoga of Shri Aurobindo and the Mother, if you haven't been exposed to it, is absolutely amazing. There is nothing else like this in the world. These are two avatars that have come together to bring this shift that's happening right now, that we're in this transition, which is why there's so much commotion and confusion. And to learn more about exactly what's happening and why it's happening, and how we, like what you had mentioned, Arvind ji, is that it's within us. It's got to change first. Nothing's going to change outside unless we start here. So I would just encourage anyone who was inspired at all or had a new aha moment during this to please do join us. It's going to be an amazing journey, and we do hope to see you there.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was wonderful, Arvindji. And you know that Aurobindo, you also Aurobindo by name. So, and Aurobindo is like Govinda, protecting light or finding light. You know, Ara is the ray of light, and Lotus, of course, Aurobindo, because he has these beautiful rays opening. Yes. My last message, I would come to the Rigveda last hymn. Yes. Go together, samgajadvam, zamvadadavam, samvomanansi janatam. May your mind be together. Devabhagam yatha purve samjanana upasate. As the gods first sat together, agreeing to share their load of action in this world. Yes. Samaniva kutich, may your will be uniting. Samana hridayanivaha, may your hearts be uniting. Same, yes. Samana mastuvo mano, may your mind be uniting. Yathavach susahasati, as it should be in your common well-being together.
With that beautiful thought, we will end today's webinar. We hope to see you all join the course. We'll also be posting the recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel. Please watch out for that and share it with all your friends. All the people who are registered and attended today's webinar, they will get that recording as well. Thank you, Vladimir ji. Thank you, Radhe ji. Namaste, everyone.
Thank you, Arvind ji.
Namaste. Thank
Namaste.
you.